Hello and welcome to the Philosophy Podcast. This is another special back to school edition for the summer 2021, and I think it will be one that has value for you going forward. This is actually a live recording of my Iowa ACDA presentation. Shout out to Lisa Ott and the great conference that she puts on there. Just a fantastic event, and I felt so welcomed. And this was one of my two sessions that I gave for Iowa ACDA, and I recorded both. So you're going to be getting this entire presentation on the free podcast feed, which is my presentation talking about the uses for me and the practices for me with Sight Reading Factory in the classroom. So that makes an obvious main sponsor for this episode, Sight Reading Factory. Don't forget that when you sign your kids up this year, you can use Philosophy at checkout for your account and all of your students' account and get a 10% knocked off the top of that entire bill. And you can do that every time when you renew. And so I won't talk more about it now because this whole episode is me presenting about how I use it and some of the ways that I get good results out of the kids. I will also throw in there a reminder that mymusicfolders.com has the best singer's mask on the market, and we're all going to need them again this year. So if you don't have those or don't have enough of those, I will point out a couple things. They are the best construction, the most flexible, the most breathable, and give the most protection. If you need to find something that kind of hits all those points, I strongly recommend looking at the resonance mask from mymusicfolders.com. And the other thing that's cool about it is they have lowered their price from last year. They've knocked a few dollars off of it. Plus, you can enter Philosophy at checkout and get another few dollars knocked off of that. So those are becoming more affordable as time goes along. Finally, before we jump into the presentation, you can join my Patreon. My Patreon has grown quite a bit in the last month. People are getting excited about this content and about the conversations and tips that are happening on the show, which is great to see. You can go to patreon.com/Philosophy. And at that, if you remember there, you get my private podcasts. That's a $3 a month subscription. You can also go in at $5, go in at $10 with some other perks over there. But if you're at that $3 level, you get access to the private podcast feed. And some of my other presentations that I gave this summer, the live recordings, will be dumped onto that feed as well. So like I said, you're going to hear this whole presentation today on the free feed, but some of my other presentations on building a program and retaining students, which I know is a really hot topic and something we're all concerned about. I gave two presentations on that topic this summer, and I'm going to put those on the Patreon feed to make those a nice little perk over there for you Patreon members. Speaking of Patreon, I do also have a producer level on Patreon. So you get a shout out on the show each time I do a Patreon plug. And of course, a thank you to those people who go in a little bit above and beyond over there. The Patreon producers are Vasquez Academy of Music, Ulrike Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Chandler Smith, David Kowalczyk, Kyle Peterson, Michael Herron, Ryan Main, and Steve and Kathy Kakachik. So head on over to Patreon and join any of those levels, and I appreciate the help there because it really keeps the lights on for this show. With no further ado, here is my Iowa ACDA presentation on using Sight Reading Factory in the classroom. I hope it helps. Okay, so is my microphone less weird than hers?
Yes.
1 second.
Okay, so let's just, I just don't want to, no offense, by the way.
Yeah, no, it was.
Yours should be fine now.
Okay,
They were on the same frequency.
cool. So am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, I'm really excited to be here, and I'm going to start out by kind of explaining that I have not planned any type of presentation for today.
Great.
Okay. Partly because I talk about Sight Reading Factory so much that I don't need to. So here was my thought. Rather than coming in with like a plan, here's what I'm going to show you, here's what we're going to do, I want to poll you a little bit because I don't want to present on stuff related to literacy and literacy instruction with Sight Reading Factory that you already know. So I'm going to get a sense of our level in the room of understanding how this software works or how this website works. So do we have any Sight Reading Factory users in the room? Okay, see so I don't want to do a whole presentation of click start sight reading, like that whole thing. I will show you a few features that you might not be aware of, but what I would like to focus on, I was hoping that would be the case, that we'd see a bunch of hands go up. What I'd like to spend this time doing is giving you some ideas to improve your the way you use it, the philosophy, the practice, and then hopefully results that come out of that. So one of the things that I think is especially transformative about Sight Reading Factory for me is that when we switched to very much like what you're seeing right now, my classroom has well, not quite that large, but an almost movie theater size screen where it's just, I don't know if you guys have seen these share walls. They're like just white grease board things that are, you know, kind of large, and then you can also use them as a projector. That's what we have set up in our room, so that our sight reading is now exclusively on the screen, as opposed to when I was a young teacher, because I'm old, and where you had to like print from printers onto paper and then pass it out, and that took time, and then you got to pass it back in, and you got to pull out the sight reading textbook or whatever it is that you bought, and so there were all kinds of excuses on a day-to-day basis to not work on literacy because it took time out of the rehearsal. And now I've got my process down to the point where our entire literacy instruction is encapsulated within a 5 or 6 minute warm-up / focus time at the beginning, and we've worked on our literacy. We've built that into our warm-up of class. It's part of the routine. And the screen and the technology in Sight Reading Factory has really opened the door for that, because it takes 0 time to get it set up and get us doing what we're going to be doing. So you are going to be singing today, so be ready for that. Start vocalizing a little bit, warming up, just quietly. So yes, so one of the things that I think is a little bit unique about what I believe in and preach when it relates to literacy instruction, so I'm just going to start out with that, give you some background, and then we're going to dive into the website. Singers don't need to have notes played, ever. They don't. We all grew up that way, though. We all grew up that way. I grew up that way. I grew up with an accompanist sitting at the keyboard playing all the notes. On my college choir, accompanists were playing all the notes. My first several years teaching, I had an accompanist sitting there playing all the notes. Then one year, I was leading a 9th and 10th grade chamber choir. This is one of our extracurricular groups after school. And we had an accompanist that was a volunteer accompanist, and she bailed on us at the last minute. Okay? I don't play the piano. I mean, I'm okay, but I'm not an accompanist. And so then it was just me, young teacher in the room with 35 hormonal teenagers touching each other's butts all the time, trying to lead a rehearsal while sitting at the keyboard. And eventually I flipped out. Guys, I can't play your notes. I can't play the notes and lead the rehearsal. We're going to have to figure this out. What tools do we have? Well, we learn solfege, and sometimes we sight read in class. And so we're just going to have to do that, and I'm going to wave my arms, and you're just going to have to figure out your parts. Fast forward to the end of the school year, that group of 9th and 10th graders at my school was singing more in tune, learning their notes quicker than the 11th and 12th graders were at the same school. The 11th and 12th graders were having their notes played for them all year. By the end of the school year, yes, the older kids had richer tones and more developed voices and all of those things, but if you knew what to listen for, you were hearing those 9th and 10th graders actually become better musicians faster than the older kids were. Okay? Fast forward again 3 years, those freshmen that went through that frustrating experience with me in 9th grade are now juniors. I walked in on the very first day of school in our advanced choir with those same kids. I put Joseph Reinberger's Abendlied, 6 parts a cappella, in front of them, played an F, and only an F, one time. We rehearsed and learned the entire piece in 40 minutes and never touched the keyboard again. And by the way, they never left the key of F. Not even a little bit. Okay? And the reality is that's now child's play in my program. Okay? So what I discovered, that's not a flex. It's just a reality of how powerful kids' brains are. Right? And so I was talking about this yesterday with some other colleagues where in my world now, there is no such thing as a raise your hand and a singer saying, could you play that spot at measure 22 for the altos? They don't even ask, because they know that it's not even part of their vocabulary to ask for notes to be played, because now they have tools to figure it out on their own. Okay? So my philosophy has been shaped by my practice, not the other way around. I've been responding to the reality that kids at any age level by the way, and at any prior experience level can learn to hear the music in their head. Okay? So today, what we're going to do is just run through a few activities that I do on a regular basis with kids at school. So we're going to go chronologically here. We're going to go to the first day of school, 9th grade, treble choir. And for those of you who, let's see, I'm going to have to move this guy. Sorry, Zoom people. You may feel dizzy. Okay. So I'm going to go first day of school, level 1, because in my program, as I mentioned, any previous experience level, my program, kids do come to 9th grade, not from scratch. We do have a feeder program where they do know what solfege is, they know what do re mi is, they know what quarter notes are, they know what a key signature is, they just don't know how to do any of those things. Like they've been exposed to the terminology. And so I recognize in some of our programs, our kids, our 9th graders, or say you teach 7th graders, 8th graders, they do come with none of that knowledge, and you do have to start where the kids are, right? So I want to make that very clear. So that's where I'm starting. I'm starting where I don't have to kind of explain what a piece of music looks like, but I do have to explain to them how to do it. So I'm going to choose 3/4 time for us. And with treble voices, oftentimes I'm going to go key of F, key of G, key of C, just like the Sight Reading Factory recommends that we do. Oops. Yep, okay. I'm just going to make that bigger. And on the first day of school, I might start just like this, okay? Where it's one part, I just want to see, on the first day of school, I want to see what they sound like, and I want to see or hear what their vocabulary currently is. And when I say vocabulary, I just want to see like what level of complexity of music can this group conceive. Because I do very much believe in the idea that we teach the kids in front of us, not the hypothetical kids we wish we had. Right, so starting simple, nothing wrong with that. Okay, so then I'm going to come over here and go ahead and sit up, everybody, because we're going to sing. Is that loud enough? Okay, so in the warm-up, I am kind of passing. I'm not going to take you through. I don't have a piano of the vocalization that I would normally have already done by this point. So this would be like step 2. We've vocalized. We've done some kind of solfege warm-up. I've got the hand signs on the wall, right? So all of the vocabulary is in the room that they can read. And I would explain to them that the first note you see there is do. Okay, and here's the hand signs on the wall. And let's sing do, and let's use our hands. Go. Do. Okay, let's see, you guys cheated because you sang like grown-up choir teachers. Sing it like your 9th graders would. Go. No, I disagree. That's way too loud. And it wasn't breathy. Try again. Try again like 9th graders could do it. Go. Oh, no, okay, let's go ahead and sing it, guys. And then of course, somebody who wants to be the snotty 9th grade girl? Anybody want to be the snotty? Girl. Okay, good. So then your response should be. But I was singing. Go.
I was singing.
No, you weren't. You were exhaling with noise. So let's define singing. And this is very much part of that first day of class for me. Let's define singing. It's got to be on pitch, and it can't be breathy, which is a problem that 9th grade girls can fix on the first day of school. Okay? On the first day of school. So we would focus on the breath and the onset, because if those two things are timed really well, in almost no cases will the sound be breathy. So I would demonstrate do, do, go, do, do, do. Okay, good. Doesn't need to be louder than that. It just needs to be coordinated. Okay, if we can coordinate the onset, we're good. So we've established that. And then I will teach them the scale and arpeggio pattern that I use, and I call this their answer key. All right, so everything we're going to try to do on this exercise falls within this answer key. So go ahead and use that same tone and follow my hands. Go. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re. So they would probably be okay up until now. So they would usually be able to get this. They'd usually be able to even find this, but only if they find this, right? So they're not going to find it in, randomly in a vacuum, but they'll find it in a sequence. It's almost always the do, fa that we lose. I lose them on the first day of school. So let's pretend like you didn't get it. So sing this again. Do, re, mi, fa, do, fa, do, re, mi, fa, do, fa. Yeah, good. So we're drilling that, but notice that I'm not singing it for you. I'm teaching you on day one that you can find it, and by doing this, without using any words, I'm giving them tools for solving that problem. Right? I'm giving them tools, and then by a couple repetitions, we've gotten here, and then I go ahead and finish the sequence, so you can be grown-ups again to make it go faster. Do, mi, so, mi, do, fa, la, do, mi, so, mi, do, so, do. And then I introduce to them the concept. By the way, on the first day of school, this takes more than 5 minutes. Once they've gotten the concept over the course of the school year, it truly takes 5 minutes. And then I introduce to them the concept of audiating, which I simply define as hearing the music in your head before you sing it. Okay? And one of my former professors, Eve Ely, and one of my mentors, had this theory back before any of us were talking about audiation and literacy instruction as much as we do now. He had this theory that human brains can only hear in tune. We never hear ourselves out of tune. Okay? Meaning, until I start to sing, I'm going to hear the music in tune. Think about, like, if you imagine, and this is how I kind of explain it at the beginning of class to my kids, try to close your eyes and hear someone singing happy birthday to you. Go. That's not it. Go ahead and just close your eyes. Hear that in your head. Can you hear it? Okay, so the theory that he would have put forth is that no matter what your musical training level is, you didn't hear that in your head drifting all over from key to key. You heard it as the song. Okay? It's only when we start to sing with our poor vocal techniques do we then drift into other keys. It's our body that makes it out of tune, not our brain. So if the literacy is starting from an audiation standpoint, I want them to hear this all the way through without changing keys. Okay? Because then I'm also teaching them the tool of how to react when it doesn't quite sound like the CD that's playing in their brain. I want that to be louder than their voice. I want the CD to be louder than their voice. Okay? So I talk about audiation, and then I show them what it looks like. So I demonstrate that if I'm going to audiate this exercise, it would look like this. You see what I'm doing. They recognize what I'm doing. I'll usually then ask some questions. What did you see? What were some things that you saw me doing? I'll sing the beat. That usually somebody will notice that. Now, of course, we also know, we're putting ourselves back in 9th grade brain now, where one of the biggest problems you'll get right away is you'll get the wandering eye kid, right? They just won't even look at it, right? That's a challenge, and so oftentimes I'm scaffolding this instruction from holding their hand all the way through it to eventually letting them fly on their own. My screen is down more here, and so I might just come up and just follow my hand. So go ahead and do your hands, and just pretend like I'm touching the top line, right? So go ahead and do what I just did. Use your hands and audiate it. Ready, and go. And I'll just tap, okay? Then I get to be the, what's that, the karaoke ball. Right? And I just dance around, like across, because I do want to train their eyes to move across in sequence. All these things are brand new to them. Because in my program anyway, everybody's situation is different. Like I said, they know the lingo. They just are very rarely being asked to do it, like to actually do it. And so this kind of puts us in that spot. So that might be, this is all, again, fast forward. We get through that every single time. Now this is important. Every single time they slip back into breathy teenage girl voice. Stop. sing it. Okay? Because that's huge, and I'm going to explain why that's so huge later. Allowing them to sing with a hole between their vocal folds will make every pitch and rhythm acquisition harder later. Okay? So it's like my developmentally disabled daughter. She's on an IEP, and one of the reasons that she's on an IEP is because she had I won't bore you with the long story, but she had a traumatic birth, not enough oxygen to the brain during the birth process, and it caused a lot of motor skills delays. Her brain works, but she can't make her fingers do things. She was the kid who couldn't tie her shoes at age 9, couldn't button up her pants, like it was just the small motor things. And of course we thought, oh, let's put her in piano lessons, because that will help her develop those things, but she couldn't do this at age 8 or 9. It was, right? So the metaphor here is that she was learning, let's call it, Mary Had a Little Lamb or whatever, and the piano teacher wanted her to practice using different fingers for the different keys. But because her brain was ahead of her body, she already had the song memorized. And so she could play with one hand or with one finger and trying to convince her why later you're going to need to use your other fingers. She just could, but Dad, I know the song, right? So this is why the fundamentals, even of this, of okay, yeah, you can sing all the solfege syllables and you can exhale with noise on the approximate pitches on this exercise, but if I let you use that breathy tone, what about when the exercise starts a range that's different, that's more than this? What if the exercise starts crossing your chest voice, head voice? If you're not singing correctly from the beginning, you're going to change keys. You'll change keys. And I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this, but 9th grade girls starting on an F and singing a scale down to middle C, if they don't know how to transition into their chest voice, they will change keys. They'll change keys. So again, it goes back to the Dr. Ely theory, is that they will sing out of tune, but it's not because of their ear. I am so tired of choir teachers telling kids that sing out of tune that it's an ear problem. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Unless you've gone to the doctor and you've been told that your ear's broken, it's not an ear problem. It's a vocal technique problem. So diagnose the problem correctly. But that is not the purpose of my presentation. That's just a soapbox. Okay. So day one, we've accomplished this. And depending upon how successful that was, so let's say some years it's true that I have a group of 9th graders, boys or girls, that will just breeze through something that easy. Some years they really struggle. And that determines what we do tomorrow, right? So if they breeze through it, I might say, man, you guys nailed that so much yesterday that I think we could divide the class up into 2 groups. I think we could try something else. So for those of you who are familiar with Sight Reading Factory, you know that you can come over here to the first tab and restructure. So I might, on day 2, do a 2-part exercise. You have the sopranos, the altos. Actually, we got a mixed group here, so let's do a basic left thing. We'll call them baritones. And now we have 2 parts. And notice that I'm not talking to them yet about key signatures. We'll get there. For right now, I just want them to know that we're in the key of G. And you don't need to understand why that is, but just smile and nod. We're in the key of G. We'll get there eventually. And I probably would use my next button until I get something that starts both groups on Do. There we go. Yep. And again, keeping in mind this is just still day 2 of the school year. I want to go slow with the concepts that are being introduced at the beginning of the year. I don't want to throw too many curveballs at them. And so I will go ahead and say, okay, now we're in the key of G. Yesterday we were in the key of F. We'll talk about that later. But now our Do is 1 note above where it was yesterday, and we'll go through the same process, which I won't bore you with right now. You can kind of get the idea. So the big, just 1 second. Let me finish this thought, and then I'll take your question. So the big concept here is that I am responding to them, not using my own agenda of how fast this goes. That's really, really important. Because if you leave them in the dust, pushing them ahead, here's the problem that sometimes we don't think about. With whatever group of kids we have in front of us, there will be some kids who can move ahead at the pace you want the class to move. When you allow that to happen, then those kids who are the best kids will start to feel like they're the only kids that matter, and everyone else will just start following. That's something we really want to avoid. Like, we want this to move at a pace that everybody can keep up. And the way, of course, that you determine that is you determine that by eyeballs. When the eyeballs in the room start glazing over, you know you've lost them, right? And then there will, so I could kick this up, probably with some of my freshmen, I could kick this up to level 2, level 3 on the first 2 or 3 days of school, and then they would just sing louder and guide everybody, right? But I want to make sure I'm seeing everybody's engaged. Every single singer is, oh yeah, okay, I can do this. That's important. Yeah, question back there.
What do you do with kids who refuse to use the hand signs? Because
I fail them. No, I'm not joking. They fail my class. There is no refusing to do things in my class. I'll just send them to the office like that. You don't get to come into a class and choose what you do. I'm in charge. So, and that has everything to do with how my class is set up in terms of its grading rubric. When the grading rubric is clear, when the grading rubric is objective, then your administrators will support it because that's how all the other classes are. You do those things. And so I think, number one, it's treating it like a disciplinary issue rather than academic issue. If I was in a math class and I walked in and I told the teacher that I don't do addition. That's not one of the things I do. Sorry. We would laugh at that student in the same way that we should be laughing at kids who refuse, well, you know what I mean. I don't want to laugh in their face. That's not the point. But we should be treating it with as much ridiculousness as kids who refuse to do things in our class. If we want to be treated like an academic subject, we've got to teach it like one. So that's just another soapbox. But since also that's a little bit, to get more detail to your question though, I did an episode on my show, episode 21, lays out my entire grading rubric that I really, once we changed that, solved all those problems for me. And I would just direct your attention to that. Somebody else shot up a hand real quick.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. How do you practice adding the hand signs to what they see?
Yeah, so what I found is that when you go slow, like I just did through that first exercise, most kids can keep up. So if the tempo is slow enough, if I see that they're starting to kind of flounder with their hands and not be able to do it, then slow the tempo down, demonstrate, do what I do. I might even give them permission to take their eyes off the screen, go back to let's all just do it together, build the mechanics of it. Because, and actually I think this might even go back to the question of what if they refuse? The first question you've got to ask is why are they refusing? They're refusing because they don't think they can. Solve that problem for them and they will start doing it. So, I don't know why twice in one presentation I'm invoking Eve Ely, but another, maybe he influenced me, I don't know. But one of the things that he also used to say is that all students want to do well. If they're not doing well, it's because they don't know how. There is not, I don't care how troubled of a background a kid has, that something in their mind when they come in to cause trouble in our class is because they don't think they can be successful if they try. And they don't want to look like they're dumb, they don't want to look like they're incompetent, right? So I guess the answer to that question is I might give them, for example, if I do see a kid, because this is a really good question, if I do see a kid who is maybe starting at the beginning, they've shown their do to start, but then as the exercise goes, I see the hand go down to the side. My first instinct is not that that's a discipline problem. That's not where I go first. My first instinct is that this kid doesn't know how to do this, right? So my first reaction is to teach, okay? And so what I might do is I might give that kid a goal. I might say, and I do call kids out when this happens, so that's important too. I say, hey, I noticed you weren't doing your hand signs. Can I give you another way to try it? Okay, all right, well, so then I might say, if you can't do all the hand signs because this is new to you, will you try to at least do the first one of each measure? And they're like, okay, yeah, I can try that because, and I'll explain to them, well, maybe you could be doing the first one of each measure and try to sing along with everybody else and then look at your neighbor and see which one they're doing on the next measure because maybe your hand just isn't ready to go that fast. All right, I've given them another option, and I think that's really important. But none of the options are just do nothing. Okay? All right, so I'm going to fast forward. We got a little off track there. And that's,
May I ask
okay, go
a
ahead.
question? Do you start everyone on Joe and just divide them into, like, say, girls and guys? Or do you do a single line with the girls, single line with the guys? Or I don't know, where do you go? How do you start?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, in this room, because we have mixed voices, I went ahead and did a soprano and a bass, a soprano and a baritone. All of our classes are treble voices together and tenor bass voices together for our beginning classes. So it's a non-issue for me. But I think if I was in a beginning mixed voice class, then I would do it like this, and all the treble voices sing the soprano, and all the tenor bass voices sing there. Because, of course, Sight Reading Factory, one of the cool things is it is intelligent enough of a program to put the lines of music in a comfortable tessitura for that key. Okay, so I would, if I did have a mixed class, I wouldn't go soprano, alto, and then, okay, guys, sing the alto part. Because it would put them in situations where they're now having to fight that vocal technique when I don't want them to fight their vocal technique. I want them to be thinking up here. Yeah?
I think she meant, do you let the girls sing it first? Or do you let the boys sing it first?
Oh!
I think that's what she meant. Like,
No, we all sing it together.
you all sing it together.
All sing it together. Yeah, so, but keep in mind that that does go back to my first transition, which is that I'm on day one with the unison exercise. I'm not moving to two parts until I feel like they're ready. Okay? So I'm going to that two-part exercise because some day before, like the prior day, whatever it was, they breezed through the one-part exercise to the point where I wasn't having to give them too much feedback, and then we're ready to try that. I'm careful not to push them ahead of where they are. If that makes, does that answer your question better? Okay. Okay, so I do want to move ahead now. So this is a process that we would start on the first day of 9th grade. Go back to my choir multi-part. And then this is what my 9th graders typically are able to do by March or April. Just for a frame of reference. Weird, right? Yeah, it's really strange. Kids aren't supposed to be able to do that. They're not. Based on everything we've all been taught, is that kids aren't supposed to be able to do that. Now, my theory goes back to my the piano thing. I think because so many of us learned that having notes played along while we were singing developed literacy, that kids can't do that if they're having the notes being played along. Because what I've discovered since then is that if the notes are being played, they're not reading. They're listening. They're listening and responding. Okay, so they're not reading any more than if I had a 5-year-old and I'm whispering over his shoulder, "See the spot run," while he's reading. He's not reading either. On a neurological level, they aren't reading. And so it's no wonder that we don't get to the point where kids can do this, by and large, as a profession. Okay? So again, this would be, by the time we get to the end of a school year in 9th grade, this is something they can start to do. And this is important. It doesn't mean they never make mistakes. When I say this is a level that's appropriate for the end of the school year for my 9th graders, what I mean is they now have the vocabulary to get through the exercise and solve the problems. Okay? So this is another aspect that I also find to be really philosophically important is, it might surprise you to hear me say this, but I think that we teach sight reading in a lot of ways that are not very neurologically sound, but I also think we grade it in really weird ways. I don't know what you guys do in Iowa, but I know in Missouri I'm very frustrated by it still because we do ask kids to sight read for our all-state choir, which is great because I value literacy. But the way we grade it is we count mistakes and we deduct points. Now, of course, I recognize that the reason they do it for all state auditions is because we can't sit there all day. Like, we've got to go in, we've got to get so many kids in, and they get to go through it once, and however many, correct answers they get basically determines their score. I don't grade it that way. Okay? So so we've talked a little bit about how the class period works and how I introduce it in the class and how the process works. And again, thinking about how using Sight Reading Factory as your main method or as your main system of delivery of the music is so great because it's customizable and it doesn't take any time. If I'm noticing that the kids are in the wrong key for their voice, if I'm noticing that we moved to level 3 when we shouldn't have, just fixing it and getting a new thing in front of them is super easy. And it also normalizes the idea that you don't have to move ahead on a certain pace. It's at your pace, right? So that's important. But while, in addition to the work that we're doing on the screen, I also test every single kid individually. Okay? So every single kid sight reads by themselves for part of their final exam. It's 5% of their entire course grade is their sight reading final exam. And the way we do that is that in October, and right now teachers are like, I don't have time to do that. And of course, what I will tell you is you don't have time not to. Your kids will I mean, imagine if your ninth graders could do this. How much time could you free up in your rehearsal to do other things? Okay? So what we do is we invest the time in October. The timeline is not exactly important. It could be September, whatever it is. But we take about 2 or 3 days out of rehearsal process. I do the cardinal sin of teaching, which is put on a movie. We put on a movie, and we have one kid at a time go into the practice room. It takes about 3 minutes. And we do a pre-test in October, September, somewhere in that area. What I'm trying to determine is what level of sight reading factory would be that kid's vocabulary. Okay? Both vocally, mentally, whatever it is, and I give them a goal. So let's say they come through a level 1 just makes no sense to them. They don't even know, they can't keep their eye on the line, like they can't stay in the same key, whatever it is. So just imagine your most clueless kid, right? I might tell that kid in 9th grade, well, by the end of the semester, I really want you to be independent. I don't use the word perfect. I want you to be independent on a level 1 exercise by the end of the semester. And so I write that down in a spreadsheet. This kid's a level 1 kid. I might give a level 1 to a freshman who just breezes through it to the point where it's just super easy because, she's probably in band. Okay. So the band kid, I might say, well, that was way too easy. Let's try level 2. Too easy. All right, great. So that kid is a level 3 by the end of the semester. Okay? They both can get an A, but the target is different based on their current level of aptitude. At the end of the semester, we invest that 3 days again, and I play another movie. I even let them choose it. It doesn't even have to be about music. Okay? And we play that movie, and that is part of their final exam to have hit that target. Now, the beauty of it is I don't count their mistakes. I don't count the mistakes. Our rubric is very simple. 50 points, okay? A 50 out of 50 means that kid was able to get the starting pitch, just like we do in class, sing their scale and arpeggio, and work their way through the exercise, singing all the right notes and all the right rhythms. 50 out of 50. But here's the trick. They can stop and fix things whenever they want. Because what skill am I teaching them? I'm teaching them a real-life rehearsal skill. In a choir rehearsal, I want to see how you react when you make a mistake. I want to teach them that making a mistake is not a sin, but when I make the mistake, I want to stay calm, I want to smile, I want to take a breath, I want to try to remember where do was, I want to try to use the tools I've learned. If I couldn't find do, so, I let them. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, do, sol. I'm evaluating not their perfection of sight reading, which, believe it or not, I don't care about. It's a rehearsal skills evaluation. Okay? So let's say they get all the way through to the end of the exercise at whatever level I set them. They might have made 10 mistakes. The All-State Choir won't take them, but I will. Right? They still got a 50 out of 50. They're being graded on growth. And what's weird about it is that in a lot of people's minds, they might hear that and they might think, well, you're just going too easy on them if you let them fix all the things. I'm like, all right. But my kids are better readers now because they're not scared. They're not scared of the mistakes, right? So that's huge. Yeah.
So I'm assuming when you do this, you don't have the metronome, you have them count themselves
Correct.
off? Okay.
Yep, correct. I give them a target tempo, but I don't count them off if it's too slow or too fast.
Do your kids then do you have them do assignments in Siren Factory as well and submit them to?
That's a good question. Yes. So let's talk about that a little bit before we run out of time. During the pandemic, we used the assignment feature because I do think that having an account for each of your kids is a really important part of this process, but I haven't addressed it yet today. During the pandemic, we used it a lot because we were virtual a lot. And so it wasn't one of my only ways to get them singing and so that I could hear them, because Sight Reading Factory will record them. So you have this assignments tab. You can create assignments. You can give it all kinds of parameters, due dates. I can let the student choose if it's rhythm. For example, I had what do you do with a kid who's at home virtually because they've got COVID and they've got a sore throat and they can't sing? Well, rhythm only. Clap into the microphone. You can do that, right? So you give us all those options. Based on their pretest, I mentioned the pretest at the beginning of the year, based on their pretest, they already know what level to choose. So when we're doing the assignments at home, they know, oh, I'm a level 2, I'm a level 3. And they're allowed to then set it the way they need to set it. I can decide how many measures. Now during virtual school, I did 12. Once we came back in person, I bumped them back to 8. But that's kind of up to you. There's no magic thing there. Now here's the one thing. The default setting for Sight Reading Factory is 100. I think that's way too fast. Way too fast. So for freshmen, I go all the way back to 60. Okay. I always bump up the countdown length to 60 also, because I want to give them plenty of time to audiate prior to singing. And then for these ones, you've got to include the metronome. So for example, freshmen, I'm going to do not subdivide the beat, but it is going to click the beat. So I just teach them that it's like Guitar Hero. You want to try to sing right with the red clicker thing. And that's, since I'm not in the room, I'm not in the room to help you, so I want as much help scaffolding as possible. So I want the cursor to move on each beat. So you can see it's highly customizable. Now, here's another thing that I do. I actually just discovered this last year during the pandemic. In class, we never write solfege syllables on the screen because I want them, I don't want to move ahead of their ability to just do that. Okay? But when they're at home by themselves, especially if they're beginners, I do put that in there. So I am a movable do person. You can be whatever person you want to be. Okay, and so I would set up the parameters, and the beautiful thing about Sight Reading Factory and the way that it creates its assignments is once I've made an assignment with the parameters that I like, then that time-intensive process of creating that is easy because the next time all I have to do is copy that assignment and give them the next one, and it's keeping track of all of that. Yeah?
A quick thing, one of the reasons why our district wouldn't allow us to buy this program was because you couldn't sign on with Google. Have they changed that yet, or?
That's interesting. All of our accounts are Google.
Okay.
So I guess the answer is yes.
Okay.
We're a Google school district, and all of our kids sign in with their school IDs.
Are they signing in through the app or through the website?
Either.
But is it a one-click, like where they just click login with Google?
No.
I
Or
don't
do
know
they
the
have
answer
to
to that.
type it in?
I don't know the answer to that. They
Because
probably have
that's
to
why
type
they
it in.
told us they wouldn't buy it for us.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
It's an accountability thing, I guess, but I don't know.
That's an interesting thing. I will forward that question on to them because I know that they are constantly working as a company.
Because it's set up a lot like Google Classroom. I mean, the whole,
They're actually working Google Classroom integration into their program very soon. My district is on Schoology. That's going to be next for them, so that they've already got Canva integration, where it'll just pull it into your grade book. Google Classroom is next for them, and then Schoology. I'm trying to convince them to do Schoology next, but that's just selfish. So currently I do have to copy the grades out of Sight Reading Factory and then go over into my grade book and drop them in, but yeah.
So, I like what you said about like kids who need to like go back and fix things. Like I'm thinking of a student that I have who like literally, because when I do these assignments, he'll just stop.
Yep.
Because he's like, I can't do this. Like,
Right.
you know, so there's no way right now in this to like, I'm just gonna put this on the screen, you record it, and take your time, because right now it has to go with the metronome, you have to do it.
I'm glad you brought that up, because the way I evaluate, as I mentioned, I let them stop and fix. Sight Reading Factory can't, and that's not actually their fault. It's because they have to limit the bandwidth that gets sent through the website. So you can't let a kid just sit there and indefinitely record an audio file. Because the
That's
whole,
why you show the movie.
right, yeah, exactly. And so here's what I do. When they're doing at-home assignments, the rubric is different. So the rubric is, I tell them the goal of that is still not to be nailing perfectly all these exercises. The goal is just repetition, practice, fluency, right? So their assignment, I did an episode on this too. Anyone who wants to email me, I can just send a link to more detailed descriptions of this. But what we do is your assignment is done when you have done one of two things. When you have sung an exercise so correctly that there's no more than one mistake on a line. You go back, you can listen to yourself, you can grade yourself. So I nailed it, submit, done. Or you are making a bunch of mistakes and you've got to get to, and I change this from time to time, but let's say 7 attempts.
That's exactly what I do.
8 attempts, whatever it is. So you're done when you've either nailed it or done the amount of practice that I want you to do for that day. Either of those is fine, and they're both worth an A. They're both an A. Yeah.
I had students that were recording and they panicked because they messed up a lot.
Yep.
And they stopped it. And then they couldn't submit anything. They couldn't go back and redo it. So I had to email. We did it through music first and added Sight Reading Factory. So what I had to do is create a backup, an extra account for the kid. I had to do an extra assignment for that kid to make up for that. Because, and you explained it why they couldn't do it, because of the bandwidth thing.
Right.
But now I know what to explain to the kids. This
Yes.
is why, don't stop, just go with it, and if not, do another try
Uh-huh.
later.
And that's where, and I think this is a hard sell at first for kids, where you really, and that's why virtual school was hard, because it's an easier sell in person to explain to a kid, no, I really don't need you to be perfect. Like, I really don't care. I just want you practicing. Because they are trained, even by high school, they're trained to, like, music is a talent, and if I'm not good at it already, then I'm not good at it, right? And that's a huge part of what we're training out of. Yeah.
So you said you do a pre-test in October, and then that sets your levels for individual students.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So I assume that your homework is where you then differentiate so that the more advanced students are doing more advanced stuff, because
Correct.
you can't do level 1 and a level 6 at the same time in choir rehearsal. Is that so? Where do you do your choir rehearsal? And do you split the difference? Do you just take it as a whole and say, you know, I have some great kids, but mostly we're here, so that's where I'm going to spend my classroom time, and then homework is where it's...
That's a good question. So the question was basically if I've got this wide differentiation of some kids doing homework at level 5 and some kids doing homework at level 1, do I split the difference in class? And the answer is I don't use any of my individual student data to determine that. I determine that based on what the choir can do. So if the choir, so it's two, in my mind, it's two separate things. The individual student work is very different than what, because as we all know, some kids can sing, read, function better with other singers singing with them. That's fine. I still want them to develop their individual ability, but I don't expect. So it's very typical that we could have, for example, my 11th and 12th grade advanced group, our SATB, they're all juniors and seniors for the most part. They start on the first day of school reading level 6s. And so they do that, and to the point where some of them are bored. I also direct a professional ensemble. Every single year, it becomes more and more frustrating for me when grown-ups are less good than my kids. You got a degree from what school? Oh, you're a Yale. Oh yeah. Why can't you read this? I don't say that, but that's what's going on in my head. And so we might have, go back to your question, we might have a choir reading at level 6 with individual singers still struggling with those level 2 and 3. That's okay. That's okay. Because I'm just trying to develop, I'm just trying to hope, make it so that they're better than they were last year. That's ultimately all I care about. I think I'm about out of time here. Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end of an episode. I hope that audio quality was better than some of the other live things that I've posted, trying to get better and better at doing kind of on-location things, especially now that there are more on-location opportunities. Speaking of which, if you are interested in having me come and present for anything that you are doing, just shoot me an email, choralosophy@gmail.com. I love giving live presentations, and we'll travel. So let me know if you're interested in that, whether it be your state chapter, your school, professional development. I can Zoom in. Any of those things are available for you, and I'd be happy to help with those things. Just reach out and we can talk about those details. Other things you can do to help, of course, are like, share, subscribe, leave comments, leave ratings in the podcast app that you use, and tell your friends that this is a valuable resource for you. And of course, using those promo codes at the vendors, ryanmain.com, graphitepublishing.com, sightreadingfactory.com, mymusicfolders.com, vocevista.com/choralosophy. All kinds of great products that you can get a discount on and support a struggling choral industry. As we all know, it's been a rough last year and a half. So head on over to any of those vendors and make a purchase. You'll get something you need and you will help out a great company. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you next week.